All right, I'm going to get started. Good morning and welcome to day 2 of the online Rankin Technical College AWD1100 C# programming class. Today, as it says, we're going to complete chapters 2 and 3 and continue to write programs as a class. And actually, the first thing I'm going to do is talk about a little bit of stuff, and I want to show you the completed program from the one that we worked on yesterday, that calculated investment. All right, I've rewritten it. It's not exactly the same way it was done in the book, but we'll look at it in just a moment. All right, tomorrow, I think I do plan on giving you this pretest, but I think what we're going to end up doing is we will push this off from Tuesday to Wednesday. And the reason for that is, first of all, I don't want to hear from people that, we had a day off and you spoiled it for me because I had to go and study for a test. All right. I mean, if it's a day off, you should be able to celebrate it with family or do whatever it is you're going to do. All right. So I think we're going to move that to Wednesday, the 17th. It's not going to affect anything in the long run. All right. All right. Um, Again, your completed work, and we're going to start working on this tomorrow. All right, it'll be due by Sunday, the 21st. And again, there's no class next Monday for the MLK observance. All right. The only other thing I want to say as we get started here is this. Now, I mentioned this yesterday, and right now, about half of you have already gotten back to me. All right. You do get a hard copy of our textbook, which is Murach C# 8th edition. You get a copy of that for free, so to speak, as part of your tuition. If you want a hard copy, please just send me something that looks like this. Just send me an email and say, I say, I want a hard copy of the text with your name and your email address on it. And if you don't want one, do the same thing and just say, I don't want one. That's totally fine. Now, I got an email from one of the students yesterday, and this student asked, they said, I live closer to the St. Louis campus. Can I have the book delivered there? The answer is yes. So if you'd rather pick it up in St. Louis than you would pick it up in Wentzville, even if you've sent me an email already, just let me know. All right. There's 5 books right that arrived this morning in Wentzville already. All right. So far, like I said, 8 people have gotten a hold of me, and I think 4 of them wanted books and 4 of them did not. So even if you've sent me an email already and you want to pick up your book at St. Louis, just send me another email and say St. Louis, please, or something like that. And again, if you don't want one, do this. I'm going to bring this up tomorrow. Then what I'm going to do is I've got a list of all of you in the class. And on Monday, I'm going to send that list to Sean Bowers, who's the head of the bookstore in St. Louis. All right. Okay. So with that said, before we go into chapter 2, let's take a look at what we were working on yesterday. All right, and what we were working on yesterday, and that's my grandson and granddaughter, we were working on this calculate investment program. So I'm going to bring that up right now. All right, I stretched mine out a little bit. I thought it looked nicer like this. Now, as of right now, and I think I mentioned this yesterday, but only one of these can be active at a time. So I can either do a future value calculation or a monthly investment calculation. All right. Well, right now we only have code for one of them. So I put the code in that it says, if this one is checked, then do everything. Otherwise, if this isn't checked, meaning if neither one of them are checked, or if this one is checked, don't do anything. So that's the way it runs right now. All right. So I'm just going to run it quickly just to show you what it looks like. And I compared this with something online, and it did give the same answer. So if I say 1,000 there, interest rate of 2% for 10 years. Now think about this. That's $1,000 a month for 10 years. So that's 1,000 times 12 times 10. All right, so in other words, that's $12,000 a year times 10 years, which means it's $120,000 you're putting in. So over 10 years with 2% interest, you are going to end up making on that $12,940.86. All right, you'll notice if I clear and I just choose monthly investment, even if I fill in stuff, nothing happens. Only something happens, all right, if I go to monthly or to future value and calculate. All right, I just wanted you to see that. Now, what I'd like to do is very quickly just go over the code that's in here. All right, and after I go over the code that's in here, we'll start on chapter 2. And there's something else that I want to mention. One of the students, and you know who you are, came to me with a problem yesterday, and I want to explain what the problem probably was and how you can at least try to solve it. All right, the exit's the easiest one. So in the exit, this is what we're doing here. All right, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to run the program and I'm going to click the exit button. All right, and now I think I can move this. Now I think it won't let me move this though. Doggone it. All right, so how am I going to do this? Let me exit and let me move this up a little bit. Right there actually should be okay, and I'm going to run it again. Now I'm going to move this down. All right, and now I'm going to click exit. And I think I can move this. Okay, so if you look here, it says dialogue result. This is a dialogue. It's a box that comes up basically. All right, and this actually technically is referred to as a message box. When you have a message box, typically you put a message in it and you put a title in it. In addition, if you want to, you can add buttons to it and you can add an icon to it. So what I've done in here is I've created a message box and it says, do you really want to exit the program now? So this is this. That's the message. Exit now is the title of the message box. Message box buttons dot yes no are the buttons. And message box dot question is the question mark icon. And what this in English says is if you press the yes button, exit the program. So if I press this, that's exactly what happens. Now, in your textbook, I want you to hear this. In your textbook, they don't do all this. When they have an exit button, they do what I'm about to show you. They replace this with one line of code. I just commented everything and they're out. They say this dot close. All right. So if I run the program again and I click exit, notice I'm not asked anything. It just kicks me out. Now, to me, that's kind of severe. And if I accidentally pressed the exit button, it's not a big thing, but I'd have to restart the program. So the way that I write mine, unlike the way they do it in the book, and they do explain this later on in the book, all right? But I create a message box, and you just saw it, all right? This is considered a more graceful way of exiting an application. Application.exit. All right, that is if you are creating a GUI application like we are now with a form. All right, a little later today, we're going to talk about console applications. You don't exit a console application in the same way. All right, so that's that one. Now, I think I mentioned this yesterday, but in case I didn't, there's actually 6 things I want to have happen when you click this clear button. I want this to clear. 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 That's 4. Actually, there's 7 things. I want this to clear if it's highlighted. I want this to clear if it's highlighted. And I want my cursor to sit right there. So clear, 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 clear. And this is called put the focus there. It's where the cursor currently rests, so to speak. So again, you'll notice that if I run the program again, and I hit enter, and nothing will happen now because I have to choose future value. But if I click clear, whoops, I shouldn't have clicked clear yet. I wanted to, let me do it again. It did work. But if I click calculate, now everything is here. And you'll notice that is chosen. All right. Now, when I click clear again, clear, 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 put the cursor here. So I'll leave the cursor right there so you can see where it is. I click clear and everything happened. All right. There's other things you can do with radio buttons. We get into that in a later chapter. I don't know why exactly the author put this in here, but that's the way they did it. So if we look at the code for this, all right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I told you there were 7 things. These first 4 are clearing out the 4 text boxes. There is actually more than one way to clear out a text box, just so you know that. Now, to me, this is the easiest way, and I try to show you what I consider to be the easiest or most intuitive way of doing something. But you can also come in here and type in this. And it works just fine. String.empty. Now, what does that buy you? In my opinion, absolutely nothing. Plus, it's what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 keystrokes as opposed to 2. All right. Some people like this better because they think it's sending a better message of exactly what it is you want to do right there. And it's fine to do that if you'd rather. All right. Most of the time, when you do this stuff, most of the time, all right, you'll probably want the easiest way, which means the least number of keystrokes. Not everybody feels that way, though. The other thing I want you to realize is when we looked at this yesterday, and for example, when I came over here to the form, and then I went over down here to the form, and I went to back color, and I clicked here, and then I clicked there to set the background color. Well, that is setting properties. That is setting properties from the properties window. But in here, these are also properties. Text is a property of a text box. But in here, the difference is I'm setting them in code. So I'm telling those things, this code here that you see in blue, I'm telling it not to run until this button is clicked. And just so you're aware of this, all right, private means this can only be done inside of the routine of the program I'm working with. Void means don't return anything. This is the name of our button, BTN clear. All right, we're responding to an event called a click event. The object is what caused that to happen. Technically, the object is you. You click the button. And event args, really probably about the only time you're going to use that is, let's say you were writing a program in C# or a game, I should say, and you decided, for example, you wanted to have let the user move his or her mouse around the screen, and you wanted to know where they were positioned all the time. Then you might use something like event args. All right. So again, these first 4 are clearing out the text boxes. The next 2, and you probably have already guessed this, is saying make sure that neither radio button is checked. So as an example, just so you see this, if I change this to true, all right, so if I change that to true and I click clear, now what you should see is the future value one should be checked when I click the clear button. Notice nothing is checked. Nothing is checked right there, but if I click clear, now it is. All right, that kind of a property that can be true or false, and you're going to see this as we go on in here. It's known as a Boolean property. All right, it's after a mathematician. It doesn't really matter the history, but it can only have 2 values. I can put true there, I can put false there. And you'll notice if I go in and type in, for example, 23, I'm going to get an error. And it's telling me you cannot convert a bool into an integer. In other words, it thinks, rightly so, that I'm trying to take a true false value and make it into a number. You can't do that. All right. Now, just so you know, and some of you who are those of you who were in my class last semester know that's not the way it is in a language such as, it's not the way that it is. No, what's wrong now? But it's not the way that it is in a language like JavaScript. In there, you can do that. All right. But in here, you cannot. All right. Again, that should be false. All right. Finally, this says only one thing on your form. Only one thing in here can have the focus at any one time. And if it has the focus, what that means is the mouse is there. Almost always, when you set the focus, it'll be to one of your text boxes, not a read-only text box, but one where you can write information to. All right. So if I wanted it to start at number of years, I don't know why I do that, but if I wanted to, I could say here, txt number of years dot focus. And now you'll notice if I run this and I put my cursors right there, but if I click clear, it's going to move over to here. And you can see exactly what happened. All right. Now, I'm not trying to waste your time at all by showing you this, but these are just things that after a while become fairly fundamental to you. You start to do things without thinking about it. All right. So that's everything in exit and everything that's in clear. Now, the other one's a little harder, as you'd probably guess. All right. So let's just break it down and look at it a line at a time. All right. This thing says, if future value checked is false, return. In English, what that means is if I click the calculate button and the radio button here that says future value, if that isn't checked, meaning if it's not on or whatever you'd call it, just return. We don't want to do anything. All right. You don't need an else in here or anything else. If I get down to here, if I get down to line 17 here, that means that that radio button was checked. Okay. Now, I don't expect you to totally understand what this stuff is. This is the way they did it in the book. I want you to know that. I went to a later chapter, and this is how they did it. I wouldn't have written it like this. There's nothing wrong with the way they wrote it, but they're making some assumptions. What do I mean? Well, this monthly investment, remember, monthly investment is the first thing. All right. Yearly investment, that's the second thing. And number of years is years. All right. So why am I telling you this? Well, watch what happens when I run the program and I don't put anything at all in here and I click calculate. All right. Now nothing happens because I didn't choose future value, but let's choose future value and now click calculate. Now, what I just showed you, it's the first time you've gotten to see this. This is an exception. I think it's chapter 7 or 8 or 9 in the book is all about exceptions. And at that point, you're going to learn how to handle this. But what it says here is the input string was not in a correct, if we kept going, it would say format over here. All right. So what does that mean? That means that it was going to, the system was coming in and trying to take whatever I put into that text box, it was trying to convert it to a decimal. And a decimal is a number which can contain a decimal point. So it was trying to grab blank or null, there's nothing in there, and convert it to a decimal. It didn't know how to do that. It doesn't make sense. The same thing would happen if I came in here and let's do this. I'm gonna put values in all these except the last one. So 1,000, 2, and then in here I won't leave it blank, but I'll put in hello, which is stupid, but just so you see it. Click it. Guess what? Same error. It's on a different line because it went through and it said, oh, you do have something, a number in your monthly investment. Oh, you do have a number in your yearly investment. Oh, you don't have a number in your number of years. All right. Now, what we're doing as we start in here for about the first 5 chapters or so is we just say, hey, we're going to live with that. We're going to assume that the person will put in the right data. We know now how to break our program, but we're going to assume it won't break. All right. You might say, well, that's stupid. It is. But again, it's the old mentality. I always give this example, so sorry if you've heard it already, but I've got 3 daughters. All right. And now 2 of them are in their 30s and 1 is in their 20s. But my 2 that are in their 30s, we signed them up for swim lessons one year. And I was lucky. I had to pull my daughter back because we got there and she started to jump into the deep end. She had never swam before, but she had no fear. All right. But the person there was giving the lesson said, hey, we have to go in the kiddie pool and then we'll go into the shallow end and later we'll go into the deep end. It's kind of a crawl, walk, run mentality. And that's the best way to learn a programming language. So we're in the crawl stage right now, for lack of better words. All right, so this is the first text box. This is our monthly investment that we're attempting to take and convert into a number. This is our yearly investment that we're attempting to do the same thing. All right, now the way that this program runs, according to our textbook, is if you're at 2% a year, well, that means that every month you get 2% divided by 12. All right. And you get, so if I put it in here, if I put 2 like I did, it's going to take 2, divide it by 12, and divide that by 100, because that's what you get every month. All right. And you get that over 12 months, you get that over a year. Again, this is the way they put it in the book. That's why I'm showing it to you like this. This is the number of years that you put in. But since we're working with months, all right, if I put in 10 years, 10 years is 120 months. All right. So this is basically, this will set the value for all 3 of our text boxes. Now, this is going to call a routine that's going to figure out the value that goes into our last text box. All right. We're going to have a whole chapter on this later, but I wanted you to see this. This is what's called a function call. So the program's running, it's here, it says, nope, it's checked. So it goes here, it goes here, it goes here, it goes here, it goes here. It sees this, and it doesn't go down to here. It sees this, and it gives up control of the program, and it goes down to here. And you'll notice it's the same name. Now I don't have the word void like I've had before. I've got the word decimal, which means it's going to return a value that's going to be of type decimal. There it is. All right. Now you don't have to understand this. All right. I'm not a financial guy, but this is just a formula that's going to go through all 120 months. And every time through, it's going to update the future value. And when it gets done going through all 120 months, it's going to take that future value and return it, and it's going to stuff it right in here. Then it's going to come down and say, okay, in your last text box, put that future value you just figured out and make sure it's in currency format, which is going to put the $ in there, a comma in there, a decimal point in there, and it'll put it to 2 decimal places. So that's the program. And again, if you go, yeah, it kind of sort of makes sense, that's where you should be. If you say it doesn't totally make sense, I'm not surprised. All right. And again, sorry if you've heard this already, I'll always remember this. The first time I was ever in a programming class, I was going to one college, but during the summer, I took a programming class at another college, and I didn't have any programming experience. And the guy went and lectured all period. I didn't understand 90% of the stuff he was talking about. Then at the end of the period, he gave an assignment, and it was working with arrays. I had no idea what the heck an array was. And all these people were laughing at the end. They're like, geez, that'll take like 10 minutes to do. And I'm thinking, I don't even know what you're talking about. So I went to the library. All right. This was before the days of the internet. So I went to the library and I used their card catalog, and I found what arrays were in a math book. I got the assignment done. I still didn't really understand it, but I got it done and I got it to work. All right. And that's where all of you can be. Everybody can do this. The only people who cannot do this are the people on day one who say, I can't do this, and then spend time trying to prove themselves right. Okay, so that's this. Now, I do want to mention something because there were, like I said, I got a message yesterday from somebody, okay, who had a problem with their code. So I want to show you something on here right now. Okay, first, let me go in and do a file, save all, and I'm going to go through and I'm going to do a couple things in here. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put another button in here. It's going to look a little weird, but I'm going to get rid of it in just a couple minutes. All right, so don't worry about it if it looks weird or the size isn't like the other ones, etc. There it is. All right. Now, right now, the name of that button is button 1. You can all see that, or hopefully you can. All right. This is the text on the button. That's not the name of the button. The name of the button is where you come in here and you go to the name property. It's button 1. Now, if I double click on this button, it's going to bring up the code window for this. Okay, it brings it up. And now I say, oh, you know what? I didn't mean to call that button 1. Darn it. So I go over here and I remove this. No, don't do that. Don't remove that. That can lead to problems, all right, if you do that, where you're going to get a weird screen and you're going to basically lose control of the program. What you do instead, if you do that and decide you want to rename it, is you go and click on the button, then you go over here to your properties window. All right, let me move this up a little bit. And you'll notice there are a few different settings here. All right. And the setting you want to use then is the one that looks like a lightning bolt. You click on that and notice it now says button 1 underscore click. So you highlight this and you hit delete. Now notice if I go back to my code window, that code is gone. So if you put something in and you screw up, that's how you remove it. How else can you screw up? Let me remove the button. We don't need it. All right. What if I double click on a label? Now it says, oh, look, label click. Well, I could put code in there, but I don't, you can't even click on a label when the program's running. So I would do the same thing. All right. And that is, I would go back to here. I would click on this label. I would click on the lightning bolt. I would find where it says the name of my label underscore click. I would highlight it, hit delete, and now you'll notice again, it is gone. All right. When you double click on any of these controls, what kind of controls do we have in this program? We've got a group box control. We've got radio button controls. We've got label controls. We've got text box controls. We've got button controls. And guess what? The form itself is a control. All right. So if I click on the form itself, it brings up what's called the form's load event. When you double click on a control, it brings up what's called the default event for that control. And if you say, I don't get it, that's what part of chapter 2 and 3 is going to talk about in a few minutes. So this says, oh, when the form starts to load, what do you want to have happen? So just so you see this, I'm going to come in here and put in message box dot show, and I'm going to put hello from my program. And I'll put a title in here that just says hello. Now, I'm not going to put a button at the end or any buttons. All right. I'm not going to put any icons in here. So it'll be a very simple button. But notice when I run this, I don't have to do anything. As soon as I start running it, all right, there's my hello. The program's loaded into memory, but it hasn't even shown yet. As soon as I click this, hello from my program, all right, it will come up. I don't know why it's taking that long, but it is. All right. So what I'm showing you here is any control that you put on a form and the form itself. All can have code associated with them. All right. They all can. So I don't want this anymore. So I always do this first. I'm going to make sure there's nothing in it. I'm going to stop my program run. I'm going to go back over here. Why this is holding me back like this, but it is. All right. Again, I don't know what's going on there, but something was. Well, hopefully this is going to jump back into design mode soon. We've been having internet problems. I'm at the college today. All right. And we were having internet problems before, but it says I'm on. All right. So I don't know what the problem is. But again, what I want to be able to do is to go over here, and there's my form, and there's my form load. And if I highlight all of it and hit enter, it's still showing here, but if I refresh the screen, it'll be gone. All right. And that's what I'm trying to show you here. Okay. All right. And again, for the person who contacted me yesterday, maybe that's not what you did. All right. But most often when you get the error that you mentioned to me that you had, that's what happens, is you go in and you start changing names. All right. Okay. So this is what I'm going to do now. I'm going to jump into chapter number 2. All right. In chapter number 2, they have us design a second form. The form that we designed is going to look like, not that one, I'm sorry, like this. It's similar to what we did yesterday, but not the same. All right. Now, one thing that I told you yesterday is when we create these things, if you remember, that when you create them, you can go in and either choose like Windows Forms app, .NET framework, or Windows Forms app without the .NET framework. And I said, we're going to choose the one without the .NET framework. Well, what I'm finding is doing it that way, it runs unbelievably slow. So I'm going to go back to the .NET framework at least for a while. And if you say, I don't have a clue as to what you're talking about, you'll watch, because I'm going to build this form for you in just a couple minutes. So again, if you look on here and we look again, you'll notice we have 4 label controls. We have 4 text box controls. Out of those 4 text box controls, 3 of them are read-only, meaning we can't change them. All right. 1 is a read-write. In other words, we can look at it and we can change it. We have 2 buttons. Again, I'm going to put a clear button in between these when we do it. We've got a form and we've got some text on the form. So that's what they have you build in this particular chapter. All right. And we're going to build it. Now, I'm not going to probably use most of the names they use. I'm going to use my own names. All right. So they say in the last chapter, we learned about Visual Studio. In this chapter, we learn, as it says, how to design a Windows Forms app. And one more time, I want you to hear this. There are 2 basic types of applications we will be creating in this class. One of them we haven't even looked at yet. It's a console application. When we run the console application, when we run this, see, is that going to come up? Of course not. Well, what's going to happen is we're going to have a black background. Our screen will go black and we'll have white writing. You'll see it in a few minutes. All right. So they talk first about how to create a new project, then how to configure a new Windows Forms app, then how to design a form. And that's basically all that, the same form I just showed you, and how to finish the design. There is no coding in this chapter. They're just setting the form up. When we get into the next chapter, chapter 3, that's when they provide the code for this form. So I'm going to go over chapter 2, then chapter 3, and then what I'm going to do is we're going to build together, if you want to watch, all right, or with me if you want to do that, 3 iterations of a calculator program. 2 of them will be console apps, and 1 of them will be a GUI app. Now, I mentioned to you yesterday, just want to say this as we get started. Guess what? Where is it? If I go out to GitHub, I still have the same error that I had yesterday. And what I mean is if I go out to github.com, I still get that. Oh, that was stupid that I did that yesterday. I contacted GitHub technical support, but it's like any other technical support. They said, well, we've got a lot of errors or a lot of customers we're working with right now. We'll get to you when we can. So I went in and started looking through it myself, and I found a thing where I could find my public profile, and there was a thing in here to delete this. All right, so well, fine, Jeff, why don't you just delete it? Because what it said it was going to do then, it was going to delete everything associated with Jeff Scott. And it looked like it was also going to remove my Jeff Scott Rankin, which has got tons of stuff on it already. All right, so like I said, I'm going to try again to get a hold of them. We're going to be a little bit behind on GitHub until that point. All right, so what I'm going to do, like I said, is I'm going to bounce back and forth in here. And what we're building, it's called invoice total. So I'm going to come in and make a folder, and I'm going to call this folder invoice total with a capital I for invoice, a capital T for total. I used to spell it right. Invoice total, and I'm running the words together. So there I have that. All right, we'll work on that in just a bit. I'm going to bounce back and forth then between what is in the book, all right, and then actually creating this. All right, so the first thing they mention in there is how to create a new project. Now, what they tell you in here is to use this one. All right, and why mine isn't working like that, I don't know why. So I'm going to create a Windows Forms app with .NET Framework. I'm just telling you that right now. All right. So it says the chapter starts by showing you how to create and configure a new Windows Forms app. So when you bring it up, you saw this yesterday. So when you start up Visual Studio, like I just did, again, you probably don't have anything here, or you might have one or two here. This is what comes up. All right. This is your get started. If you're working on an existing project, you can double click on it over here. If you're going to start a new project, typically you'll start it right here by clicking create a new project. Then when it comes up, you've got your choice. Are you going to create a console app or a Windows Forms app? All right, in this chapter, we do a Windows Forms app. So again, I'm coming in here and I'm typing in Windows Forms app. And even though I told you yesterday not to do this, I am going to choose the C# one that says .NET Framework, because like I said, it's working much better than the other one is. If I can find out why I'm having problems, why the other one is reacting so slowly, I'll let you know. All right, so I'm going to click on here. Yesterday, I double clicked on it. Today, I'm going to single click on it. Make sure you choose the one that's got C# on it. This one down here won't work with C#. So this one, then I'm going to click next. Now it's asking me, what do I want to name this? All right. And again, you just saw this. It's invoice total. Now I'm going to do something a little different here. So you see it. I'm going to name this invoice total. That'll be the name of my project. I'm going to put it into a folder that is named invoice total, and my solution will also be named invoice total. By default, Visual Studio, our editor, names the project and the solution the same thing. You don't have to do that. All right, notice now it says framework. All right, when you look right here, this is the problem. We can go up to 4.8 here if we want, but there might be some things later on in the book that unless we go back and do this with the non.NET Framework one, we're going to have problems with it. All right, so invoice total, invoice total, invoice total. All right, and click create. That is how we're going to, for at least for a while, that's how we'll be creating our forms-based programs. Now, when you look on here, again, 4 labels, 4 text boxes, and I'm going to have 3 buttons. I'll build those as they get to them in the book, but this is what we have so far. All right. So I just showed you how to go in and create the new project. And they give you that right here too. Now it says how to change the startup and development settings. There are quite a few things that if you want to take the time, you can go in here. And for example, under tools, they have an options in here. And there is a lot of stuff you can set. All right. As an example, we're going to talk about comments today. Don't worry about what they are, but comments are green by default. If you didn't want them to be green, there's something in here where you can change the color of that. You can come in here, and somewhere in here is a thing for the editor, and you can come in. Notice there's a lot of stuff. And if you think that your font is too small, you can make it bigger. These are a bunch of system settings. So take a look at them if you have an interest. I'm not going to spend any time on it. All right. Okay. The project template, as it says, it determines what gets loaded into your program initially. These files that are in here. And again, notice my solution is named invoice total. My project is named invoice total. Projects are always part of a solution. All right. All right. So how to configure this new Windows Forms app. You already saw this. Now, had we chosen the non.NET framework one, had we chosen that one, it would come up and show us this. On mine, I choose 8 because that's the one I've loaded on mine. All right, I click the down arrow and I choose .NET 8.0. I'm not going to talk any more about that right now. We will later. All right. All right, so how to design the form. As it says, the form has 10 controls, 4 text boxes, 4 labels, and 2 buttons. The author's wrong. It has 11 controls because the form itself is a control. And as it says, it lets you put a subtotal into the first text box, and then it calculates a bunch of different stuff. All right. So it says for this application, the discount percent is going to be figured out programmatically. In other words, the more expensive the thing you buy, the bigger your discount is going to be, the percentage of your discount. All right. And this just basically says when you run it, this is what's going to happen. So in the topics that follow, we'll use the form designer to design the form that's shown. All right. After we do that, it says Visual Studio automatically generates, no, not the C code, some of that C code. To make it operational, you'll have to add additional code. And as they say, that's what we'll do in the next chapter. All right. So this is what we're going to build right now. So let's build it. All right. And I'm going to bounce back and forth because we can. How's that? So I'm going to come in here. I'll keep it this size. It probably will be all right. And the first thing to notice in here is we have invoice total up here. So right now, our form has a stupid name of form1.cs. So I'm going to click on it, right mouse click on it, and choose rename. And I'm going to call mine FRM, a little f, a little r, a little m. That's called a prefix, a control prefix. Microsoft has a whole bunch of control prefixes. We talked a little bit about these yesterday. We're going to make labels, which start with LBL. We're going to make text boxes, which start with TXT. We're going to make buttons that start with BTN, and a form starts with FRM. So I've got FRM, then just like we have up here, invoice total. And I don't like that capital O there. All right, so invoice total, and I spelled invoice wrong. There we go. So invoice total with a capital I and a capital T. When I hit enter, I'm given a system message. It says, hey, you're renaming it. If there's anything else that's related to this form that's currently called Form 1, do you want me to change the name of it? All right, do you want me to change the name of it to FRM invoice total? And literally 100% of the time you'll type in yes. All right. So now it took that designer file, which was called form1 designer.cs, and it changed the name to be the same name as the project. All right. So that's fine. Now this says form 1, and remember that's a property, that's a text property. So where it says form 1, I'm going to go down into my properties for my form, and I'm going to change the text from form 1 to invoice total. And once I click on it, it'll go black and you can see it now. Not that big a thing. Well, let's start by making our 4 text boxes right here. I'm not going to worry about colors right now. Okay, we can go and change the colors later if we want. So here's our first label. All right, now you'll notice it's not very big. So I'm going to go over in my properties for the label to auto size where it says true. And I'm going to double click on the word true, change it to false. And now I can change the size of this label. All right, I'll make it a little wider. Now this is kind of hard to see. So I will take the label and I'll make it a little bit different color because I want you to see what I'm doing here. All right, let's use, doesn't matter, I'll use the light purple. All right, now I'm going to copy this 3 times. So I highlighted it. I'm going to do a Control C, then a Control V, Control V, Control V. So now I have 4 labels in here. And you'll notice as I'm dragging them around, I get these guidelines that are in here that show me when things are lined up. There's other ways to do it, but that's as easy a way of doing it as anything else. Now, I want to move this up a little bit, all of them. So I'm going to lasso them, and I'm going to move them up just a little bit. That looks good. All right. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create my 4 text boxes. So I'm going to go over to text box. And again, I'm going to double click. There it is. I'll make it a little wider. All right. And again, I'm going to do a Control C, Control V, Control V, Control V, and make my text boxes. I haven't renamed or done any or resized or anything yet. All right. Now I'm going to make my 3 buttons. That's pretty small. So I'm going to make this bigger and wider. That looks about right. Control C, Control V, Control V. So now I've got my 3 buttons. All right. You can space them out, like we said, any way you really want to. All right, now I'm going to highlight everything that's in here. I can either hold down on my left mouse button and lasso, and you can see it's all highlighted, or I can click on the form, do a Control A, and it's all highlighted. Either one works. Now I'm going to go over to font, and I'm going to make this a little bigger than I was yesterday. So I'm going to make this 20-point font at bold, and I like Arial because I just like the way it shows on screen. All right, and you can see what changed on here. All right, now the only thing I want to do is I'm going to center this a little bit. And I'm just eyeballing it. There's ways to figure that stuff out. I don't care. That looks pretty good. So I want to lock my form into place. So to show you, again, we can do it that way. I'm going to lasso everything. I'm going to right mouse click on it and choose lock controls. Now my form is locked into place. All right, so we built the interface and literally it took 5 minutes or so to do. All right, so let's go in, we'll fill in the names, and then we'll take our first break. So again, these are called subtotal, discount percent, discount amount, and total. So I'm going to call this label LBL subtotal. All right, and I'm going to go down to the text property for it and change it to subtotal with a colon on the end. So there that one is. All right, then the next one is discount percent. So this will be LBL discount percent. And again, it'll say discount percent. All right, the next one will be LBL discount amount. And it'll say discount amount. And the last one will be the total. So this will be LBL total. And I will put total in there as the name. Now, by default, when you create these, they're left justified. All right. I'm going to just make this center justified because I like that. So I'm going to highlight all of these by lassoing just the 4 text boxes. Then I'm going to go down to where it says text align. All right. It says top left, and I'm going to choose the one right in the middle. So now they're all centered. I just like the way that looks. All right. Now, since this is LBL subtotal, I'm going to take the text box and I'm going to make it TXT subtotal. And there's nothing inside of it. Since this is LBL discount percent, this is going to be TXT discount percent. You cannot have blank spaces or special characters in the name of a control. All right. This is LBL discount amount, so I'm going to make this TXT discount amount. And this is LBL total, so I'm going to make this TXT total. All right, I've got 3 buttons. They're going to be calculate, clear, and exit. So the first one will be BTN calculate. All right, I will put calculate on there for the name that's on the button. We will put an underscore before the C, so we can use that shortcut key if we decide to. So there's calculate. This one will be BTN clear. And it'll have clear on it. Remember, we cannot have 2 ampersand C's, so I'll say C ampersand LEAR. So the underscore will go by the L. Finally, I'll go to my last button, and that'll be E ampersand XIT, and I'll change the name of that to BTN exit. All right, now just to prove to myself that everything has been renamed, I'm going to click this down arrow right here and look and see if I missed anything. And as far as I can tell, I did not. So I now have my interface built and I have all of my controls renamed. All right. Okay. So just a couple things and then we'll take a break right at 9. Okay. So the first thing is when the program runs, I want it to be in the center of the screen. So I'm going to click on the form. I'm going to go down to where it says start position. And it now says Windows default, which is in the upper left-hand corner here. So I'm going to click and then click the down arrow and choose center screen. Now it'll come right in the middle of the screen when I start it. So that's first thing. Oops. All right, so that's first thing. Second thing, I want to be able to run the program, put a number in here and hit enter rather than have to click the calculate button. So I can click on the form again. I'm going to go to where it says accept button. And I'm going to choose BTN calculate, and I'm going to go to where it says cancel button, and I'm going to choose BTN clear. That means that if I hit the escape key, which is in the upper left-hand corner of your keyboard, it's as if I clicked the clear button. Whatever code is in there will fire. All right. So 1 or 2 more things, and we are taking a break. All right. I want to set the tab order, but before I do that, you may or may not remember these 3 fields right there, these 3, all right, they're all read-only. So I can, do them one at a time, or I can click on one, hold down on shift, click on another one, hold down on shift, click on another one, or I can lasso them. Now I'm going to go over to the read-only property, and now it's setting them for all 3 of those fields. It says false. If I double click, it changes to true. So those are now set, all right? All right, the only thing I don't like is I don't like the gray with the gray. To me, it's too hard to see. So I am going to go back and change the background color of the form itself. All right, now when I did that, since these are the same color, They're transparent, basically. You can leave them transparent, doesn't look bad, or we can lasso them. And again, as I showed you, we can make them a darker color. Now, that's almost a little too dark on too dark. So not only is there a background color, but there is a foreground color. So I'm going to click on that and do the same thing and make that white. So now my text is white. Again, I'm just showing you a couple things. All right, the last thing we're going to do is I'm going to set the tab order. I want, when the program starts, I want it to be right there. If I hit tab, I want it to go there, and then there, and then there. Those are the four I care about. But I'm going to set it up as 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, just so you see it. So you click first on the form, then you go to view, and you go down to tab order, and it's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. The numbers stay there until you do another view tab order. I'm going to save my application and I'm going to run it. Now, when I run it, I don't want this to be over the other one. So I'm going to go to view code here. And I'm going to run it so that I can see it on here, see if it comes in the middle, etc. And there it is. All right, that's what they asked us to do in this chapter. So we are going to take a break now, but when we come back, we're going to go through the rest of the chapter. And again, I'll bounce back and forth between what's in the book here and what we just created. It is 9:01, so let's come back. Let's make it 9:15. This will be our longer break for the morning. So I will see you in 14 minutes at 9:14, 9:15, sorry. All right, looks like it's 9:15, so let's start back up. And what I've done here is I just took the picture that I created just to show you that, again, these two are the same thing. So let's jump back into the book then. Now, I don't want to read to you, but I want to give you a little synopsis or summary of this. Text boxes can be used for input or output. We are using this one for input because we're putting a value in there. These are being used for output. All right, because their values are being set for us. Okay. And text boxes, as it says, can be read-only. Okay. After you enter a subtotal and you click calculate, everything else is going to happen pretty much automatically. All right. And it says to calculate another total, it says you can enter another number in there, which is true. All right. In other words, we didn't have to have in here, we didn't need, like I put in a clear button. You could just remove the number that's in there, put in a different number and click calculate. All right. I just thought it was cleaner to do it the way that I did it. You may or may not agree with that. All right. To close the form at the end of the application, it says you can click the close button in the upper right-hand corner right there. All right. Or you can click the exit button. All right. Now it says alternatively, you can press the escape. So they've set the cancel button on theirs for exit, where I set mine for the clear. You can do an Alt-C for the calculate, an Alt-X for the exit, and in our case, also an Alt-L for the clear. All right, so there's your three types of controls. And again, as I mentioned, the form itself is also a control. And the reason that I say that is that the form has properties just like controls do. And the form has different types of things that you can do to it that it responds to, just like controls do. All right. Now, they mention in here there's a couple of ways of adding, they give you 3 ways of adding forms to or controls to a form. The first one is kind of the way I showed you earlier, where you can drag it out from the toolbox and then let go. As it says, it's then placed wherever you drop it. You can resize it by clicking on it and grabbing one of its handles. All right, if you grab one of the handles that is on the sides, typically it's going to make it wider, and one of the ones on the top or bottom, it'll make it higher. Another way, as it says, is to click the control in the toolbox and then click the control on the form. And a third way is to double click the control on the toolbox. I showed you 2 of those 3. I also shown you the auto hide. That's that little pin feature that's in there. So nothing in here that we haven't already talked about. You should really, try them all and pick whatever you think is the easiest. So I didn't do it like this, but had we done it like this, this notice label 1, label 2, etc. It's pretty much the way that we built it though. And again, to select and work with controls, you select on it. To move it, you can literally drag it wherever you want. To resize it, you work with the handles, etc. All right. Again, I don't think we're missing anything else that's in there. How to set properties. You know how to bring up the properties window. We've talked about that. All right. So for instance, in here, they're setting the text property right there for the form. So they go into the properties window. You want to make sure whatever you want to set is highlighted. So if I clicked on the form here and I went to text, it would change what's up here. All right. But they clicked on the exit button. They went to the text. Notice they've already changed the name here to BTN exit. And then they changed the text to E&XIT. All right. And again, they do mention this. I'm not going to show this to you. All right. But when you're running a program, if I wanted to know more about a button control, I could click on it, and then your function keys that are at the top of your program, you could hit the F1 key, and that should bring up built-in help. The reason I don't do it is that it conflicts with what I'm trying to do with Teams. All right. And they don't play well together. All right. That's why I'm not going to show that to you directly. They mentioned that some of the controls have a plus or minus sign. Guess what? The font does. So when you look in here, so if I go to here and I go over to font, and I can pick any one, but if I go to font, notice it says, so I could have set the properties like this. All right, I could have set the named Arial there, the size, etc. But I like to do it all at once, so I click the ellipsis. It's just a matter of taste, to be honest with you, as far as which way you like to do things. Some of the common properties for forms and controls, all properties have a name. All right, anytime you create a property and the form itself has a name. All right, they're given default names, so labels are label 1, label 2, label 3, etc. Text boxes will be text box 1, text box 2, etc. Buttons, button 1, button 2. You already saw with the form 1. These again are the recommended Microsoft prefixes. All right. Most controls have a text property, not all. All right, but you saw the form did, and everything we've done in here has had a text property, except we haven't set any text property for the text boxes themselves. Now, the accept button, start button, I've shown you all these already. There's nothing new right there. Some other properties for controls, I've shown you the read only. I'd recommend not using tab index and tab stop, rather doing it the way I showed you, where you go up to view and then you go to tab order. Much easier to do. You don't have to worry about setting anything in a properties window. All right. And if you change your mind, you just go back up into view, do a tab order again, and reset the numbers. That's what I'd recommend. Enabled, as it says, if a control is disabled, it cannot get the focus. It's disabled. You can't do anything with it. It looks grayed out, basically. All right. And text align, I've shown you as well. I did the text align property for the text boxes to center things that were in there. All right, adding navigation features. Again, they talk tab order here. All right, you can read that yourselves. We talked access keys. That's that ampersand that you put in there. Now, you may or may not have noticed this, but when I run the program, you can see the underscore by the C, by the L, and by the X. But when you run the program, you don't see them. They still work, but they only show when you're in design mode. When you're in run mode, like I just showed you, they don't show in there. Why did they do that? No idea. The enter and escape, that's the accept and cancel. So we talked about those already. And here they say in chapter 10, you learn how to use the tab order. That's what I showed you. To me, that's much more intuitive than what they say in the book. All right. The property settings for the invoice form, this is the names they used. I used my own. And you'll notice, okay, they did not rename the labels, I believe, in here, where I do. If you decide for whatever reason you don't want to rename your labels, that's okay. I will tell you, on virtually every test, you will be asked to rename your controls using the recommended Microsoft naming conventions. And I look at that stuff. Every time, if it's worth 5 points, every time you miss one, you'll lose at least a point. All right. All right. So we're almost done. How to finish your design. It says how to rename the files in the project. You can technically rename almost anything that's in a project. There's the form. We've already done that. All right. Be real leery. They talk in here about renaming the project or renaming the solution. All right. Yes, you can do that. So let's say that when I put invoice total here, I made it TOTLL or something like that. Yes, you can change it. But if it's not hurting anything, and if I had spelled it wrong, for example, just leave it the way it is. That's what I'd recommend. All right. But again, people are going to always do what they're going to do. Saving it, one thing I always recommend is often you go in and you do a file, save all. Now, there is an autosave feature on here where it will typically save for you. All right. And if you change something and you haven't saved, so if you change it and get out right away and you haven't saved, you'll typically be prompted. All right. So that's it for this chapter. Now, I wanted to say something to you, and that is this. Whenever I teach this class, I'm always kind of as far as doing this or not doing this. But if we start to go through this and you think to yourself, I'm just really having some problems with this. I listen to his lectures, but it's not really hitting home. I would strongly recommend that at the end of the chapter, you go through these exercises that they talk about in here. I'm not going to do that. All right, but I'd suggest you do. And one of the reasons that I suggest you do is you actually have both the starter files for these and the answers. All right, you have both of those in the information that you've been given so far. All right. Okay, let's jump into chapter 3 then. All right. So as it says, this is coding and testing the Windows Forms app. So in the previous chapter, we built it. Now we're going to put in the code. They're going to mention a few things here about object-oriented programming that may make very little sense to you. It is fine if it doesn't make a lot of sense. Chapters 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16 are all about object-oriented programming. So all this stuff that you're going to hear here, right here, you're going to hear again. So we get a quick little 5 or 6 or 7 page introduction to coding, then how to add code to the form. All right. And then more coding skills. And finally, running, testing, and debugging the program. Now we're going to go through this. I don't know how much we'll get done before our next break, but we're going to go through this. And when we get done with this chapter, again, I am going to, for you, write 3 more apps today if we have time. They'll be the same app written 3 ways. I just want to show you different things that can be done. That's my idea behind it. All right. Then if we get all of that done, some of you might have seen it if you looked earlier, but I got an email back from Doug Gegelman, who's my counterpart, and we have been told that, hey, you should be giving out the same assignments, you should be giving out the same tests. So I'm double checking to see what he's doing for homework and tests. All right, and some of that will dictate what we do in here tomorrow, just so you know. All right, so let's jump ahead there. So an introduction to coding, and the first thing they talk about is object-oriented programming. Now, I don't know if any of you have gone and looked at any of the videos that I did before the semester, but in chapter 12, I talked about objects. All right, and I'll talk a little bit more about them right now, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time on them. I am right now sitting in a conference room at the Rankin-Wentzville campus. Across the street from where I'm sitting right now, there is one house that a lady owns, and I know that because I've seen her cutting her lawn. And other than that, and I don't know if she owns it or not, but there's a whole big tract of land with nothing on it. So imagine on that big tract of land, let's assume that it's several hundred acres. And some developer comes in and buys it and decides that they're going to put up, let's just say 100 houses on that particular tract of land. I don't care. They'll put in roads and sewers. I don't care. But with those houses, they have 5 house plans. And they're going to go row 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, row 2, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. They're going to have 20 rows. And they're all going to be the same row after row after row. Well, the reason I'm telling you that is each one of those house plans is could be referred to as a house plan class. It's kind of a blueprint that you're going to use to create the houses. The houses themselves are called objects. All right. So you make objects based off of classes. Classes provide blueprints for objects. And if you say, I don't get it, you know what? We've already been using them. For instance, each button object that we put on a form is a member of the button class. Each text box object we put on the form is an example of the text box class, etc. When you create objects based off of classes, it's called creating an instance of the class. In fact, the whole process of doing it is referred to as instantiation. And as they mention here, as you progress through the book, you'll learn much more about classes because C# is an object-oriented programming language. Then they even mention, I'm not going to say a word about this. In chapter 12, yeah, we're going to learn a bunch more. All right. So they come through here and we'll look at it in a minute, but they summarize these different concepts. Okay. Now, notice that the characteristics are called properties. Well, isn't that nice? Because we have a thing called the properties window. And that's where your properties are set. You set them either directly in the properties window or you set them in code. All right. Methods, for a while at least, we're going to refer to methods as functions. They're basically the same thing. All right. But they're the behaviors. They're what an object can do. Now, the last thing they talk about in here are events. C#, like most other programming languages, is what's called an event-driven language. So right now, you've already seen this, but just to show you, if I run this program, press the wrong button, sorry about that. Try it again. So if I run the program, I can put stuff in here if I want, but guess what? The program doesn't do anything with it. Why? Because these are the events that the program is going to be designed to respond to. And there's no code in there to respond to those events. So when you say something is an event-driven language, that's exactly what it means. It's kind of like it sits there and waits for things to happen. All right. So as it says, objects, classes, these are just what I just told you. Properties, methods, events. All right. So how to refer to those? The way that you refer to a property or a method is you've got the name of the control followed by a period, which is known as a dot, followed by the property or the method. All right. Now, this is kind of important right here. It says a property or method you can refer to directly is called a static member. And notice in the next chapter, we'll talk more about them. The reason I bring that up now, though, is a little later today when we go in and we look at this simple calculator program that we're going to write. All right. And we write it first as a console application. All right. When we do that, much of the stuff in there is going to be static. I'll explain what that is and why that is when we get to that point. Now, Visual Studio has IntelliSense. Hopefully, you've already seen that. Sometimes it'll come up and make suggestions. Sometimes those suggestions are great. They're exactly what you want. Sometimes they're not. You can come in and turn that stuff off if you want to. All right, you can. All right. Now, the other thing I want to mention on this page is when they talk about closing a form, they're going to say this dot close, not like I show you with the message box, etc. They're just going to say this dot close. And this is a key word in the language, the word this, THIS. And as they say, it refers to the current instance of an active form. If that confuses you, hold off until chapter 12, because we'll talk about it in more depth and breadth of coverage at that time. So here's an example of the IntelliSense coming up and saying, hey, so if you want to choose one of these things, all right, you can typically you can like click on it and tab or even double click on it to choose it. All right. Here's some statements that refer to properties. So again, the name dot the property. Here's some for methods. The name dot the method. Here is an event. The name dot click. All right. Now, when you do that stuff, there's going to be things that happen in the background. They're talking about it right here. And I want to show you this. All right. This thing, this wiring. You don't have to do this. This is what's going to happen in that designer file. And what it's saying is, hey, yours is called BTN exit underscore click. But what I want you to do is on the button, I want you to run the click event. All right. And that's basically what it's saying there. These are some of the common events. I'm not going to go over them in really much detail. You know, double click just means you clicked it twice. Enter and leave are most often used for, they're not used that much in this language, but they can be depending on what you want to do. And there's other events too. There's mouse events. So like I mentioned earlier, if you were coming in and writing a game in C# and you wanted to do different things when the mouse was in different positions, you could do that as an example. All right. Now, common form events. And if you look at those, it says load, and I already showed you that. That's when the form is loaded into memory. Notice the next two, because they're not the same. There's closing and closed. All right. If you put code in the closed event, the form is already closed. But if you put it in the closing event, so let's say I wanted to check something, and if you didn't do something, I didn't want to let the form close. I would put it in the closing event, not in the closed event. All right. All right. Adding code to a form. Well, that's what they're doing in here. All right. So let's put in some of this ourselves. Now, just so you know, and again, I've been told I do things in a quirky way, and maybe I do, but I like to put these in here in my code window in the order they are right here. So I'm going to click on my calculate button first, and there it is. Then I'm going to click on my clear button, and there that is. And then I'm going to click on my exit button, and there that is. So they're in that order. That doesn't mean I'm going to put the code in that order. That just means that's the order in which I'm going to do them in. I like to typically do my clear event first. And what do we want to do here? Clear, 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 focus. So in there, I'm going to say txt, and the first one was subtotal, dot text equals nothing, txt, and the next one I think was discount. You can put them in any order. It doesn't matter. Discount percent dot text equals nothing. Then, and I notice now that when I put that in, you can see that I put an uppercase I there. I don't like that, so I'm going to fix it in a minute. So txt discount amount dot text equals nothing. txt total dot text equals nothing. And finally, txt subtotal dot focus. That's my focus event. And if I want to, I can manually come in here and line these up. By no means do you have to do that. All right, so that's done now. Now, again, that I goofed up. All right, so I'm going to go change that. So this is my discount percent right there. And I'm going to go back to the name, and I'm going to change that from a big I to a little I. And hit enter. And you'll notice when I go back, it changed it in here for me. All right. Okay, so that's that one. All right. One thing I have to remember is to send out to you today. I always send it out to people. If you want to use it, fine. If you don't, it's also fine. But I'm going to send you this code snippet that is, I've got it here someplace. There we go. Yes, this right here. This is what I always put in for my exit button. All right, so I'll send that out today in the mail that you'll get a little later from me. And I'm going to put that in here. That again sets up that dialog box. Do you really want to exit the program? Exit now. If you want, you can, of course, always change what's in there. All right. Yes, no button and a question for the icon. If you click yes, it'll do a normal program exit. So right now, if I save this and I run it, okay, I can put anything I want in here. All right, I can center that if I want. Maybe I'll do that later, but I can't. These are read-only, so I can't put things in them. But there's where my mouse is. Clear worked, and I'm back here, but my cursor's flashing there. And exit also works. All right, so I am going to go back and highlight all of these, and I'm going to go to the text align, and I'm going to set it, instead of left, I'm going to make it center. You don't have to do that. All right, so the only one that's left is the calculate. So we're going to put that in a couple minutes, but I'm going to first jump back into the book. Now it says to handle the click event, double click the button. We already did that. All right. You can do the same thing for the form. I already showed you that. All right. It says in chapter 6, you'll learn how to handle events other than the default event. There's a lot of stuff that you can do. All right. Next, they go in and they talk a little bit about IntelliSense. All right. And what they mention in here is typically if you put your mouse on your code, okay, and you start typing, the system will try to figure things out for you. And again, if you want to choose those, you can typically hit the tab key or the space bar to select it. So as it says here, the IntelliSense lists keywords, data types, etc. All right. When you highlight an item in the completion list, the tooltip is displayed. So when you highlight that, it'll give you a little bit of information about it. All right. The event handlers in here. So again, what they're saying is, notice they did the this.close. I didn't. So the other code that they're going to put in here is this code. Let's take a few minutes and go over it. This says when you click the calculate button. So the first thing we're doing here is we're telling it to take what we put into that text box, which we called TXT subtotal, and we're attempting to convert it to a decimal. All right, so again, if we leave it blank, or if we put something non-numeric in it, the program's going to break. You've been told. All right, then we're creating our own variable in here, discount percent. That discount percent is going to end up being set, and that's going to be what goes into this second box right here. And it'll be predicated on how much the amount was in here. Like if it's less than $100, it'll be one amount. If it's between 100 and 300, let's say another amount. Over 500, another amount, etc. All right. So what are they saying here? What they're saying is if what we put into the text box is greater than or equal to 500, our discount percent is 0.2M. Now, a couple things. When you say that a variable is of type decimal like this, you oftentimes use decimal when you're working with monetary figures, all right, like a decimal point. But when you use decimal and you give it a value, you have to put either a lowercase m like Mary or an uppercase M at the end when you're setting it, like right here. So if what we bought was greater than or equal to $500, the discount percent is 20%. If what we put in there for the subtotal is greater than or equal to $250 and it's less than 500. So in other words, it's between $250 and $499.99. Then our discount percent is 15. If the amount is greater than or equal to $100, but less than $250, so in other words, between $100 and $249.99, your discount is 10%. Notice there's no other else on the bottom. So if you buy something that's less than $100, you're not going to reset the discount percent. So it's 0. All right. Then we figure out the discount amount. The discount amount is what's going to go into our third text box. All right. And as it says there, it'll be the subtotal times our percentage. So if we bought something under $100, that'll be zero. And you know anything times zero is zero. So there'll be no discount amount. Finally, to figure out our final total, they call invoice total, but we just called it total on ours. All right. It's your subtotal that you put in minus the discount amount that you just calculated. Then here, what we're doing is we are filling up the text boxes. And you'll notice that for each one of these values, all of them are numeric, and we want to take every one of them and format them. When you see a C there, that means format them to currency. When you see the P there, that means format it to a percentage. They've got a P1 in there, so that means format it to a percentage with one decimal place. All right. Then when you're all done, set the focus back to your subtotal. Okay, so you could do another one, and that's it. Now, they give you some rules in here. Use spaces to separate words. This is a case-sensitive language, so use the right capitalization. End each executable statement with a semicolon. If you don't, if the system expects you to put a semicolon in and you don't, you're going to get what's called a syntax error, which means it'll be red underneath it, and it'll be like a squiggly red line. All right. Each block of code that you create must be put in braces. What does that mean? Well, notice this if, this block is in braces, this else if, this block is in braces, and this else if it's in braces. In addition, the entire routine has a beginning brace and an ending brace. So does that one. Right? So when you double click the buttons, yeah, it's going to start to put the code in there for you. We just went over what's happening in both of those events. All right. Now, I'm going to jump back in and I'm going to put in the code now. I've actually printed off a hard copy for me. So I'm going to put it in exactly like they did it here. Except if my names are different, TXT subtotal, etc. If my names happen to be different, and they are, all right, then I either have to change my names, all right, or I have to use my names for code. I'm going to use my names, all right. But when I can, I'm going to put this in exactly as it is here. So I'm going to go back to here, double click on calculate, and start putting the code in. All right. So decimal subtotal equals. Now notice when I say convert dot, there's the IntelliSense kicking in. And notice decimal is highlighted, and off to the left, it says what it's doing with a decimal. It's also smart enough that it says, oh, that's a decimal. When you do a convert dot, you want to go to a decimal. And that's true. That's exactly what we want to do. All right. Now, if I click tab here, it accepts that. Now, it's giving me an error because what it's showing next in gray has not been entered yet. If I wanted to enter that, I could hit tab again. That's not what I want to put in there. I want to put TXT subtotal subtotal.txt. That's what we want in there. They call theirs TXT total. I called it subtotal. All right, so that's the first line. And again, next, decimal discount, and they call it PCT, and they want it to be equal to 0. Now, you'll notice in there, we don't need to put an M on the end because 0 is 0. You can put an M on the end, either a lowercase or an uppercase. I would suggest using lowercase because that's how you see it on most programs. But if you'd rather use uppercase, you can. I'd also suggest not mixing them up and using one and then using the other, then using one. You can do that, but that could confuse people. And especially if you're creating code that later possibly somebody else is going to work on, probably the last thing in the world you want to do is confuse them. All right, so we've got that. Now we're going to put in our if statement. So if the subtotal is greater than or equal to 500, then our discount percent is equal to 0.2. Now notice if I don't put an M in, I do get an error. And it's letting me know, hey, you put that in there and you have said that that is a decimal. So you need an upper or a lowercase m on the end. All right, so there's that. Otherwise, so else, not else, if the subtotal is greater than or equal to, I think it was 250, and the way you say and in here is with 2 ampersands. We'll be going over that in another chapter. And the subtotal is less than 500. Why did we say that? Because this was greater than or equal to 500. We could have said less than 499, or we could have said less than or equal to 499.99, which would have been the same thing. All right, so if that's the case, the discount percent is 15.15 M. All right, otherwise, if the subtotal is greater than or equal to 100 and the subtotal is less than 250. If that's the case, all right, our discount percent is equal to 10%, which is 0.1 M. Otherwise, again, there's no discount. So it's going to take the default right here. Now, notice if I put my mouse here, it says it's assigned a value, but it's never used. Well, it really isn't true. It's used here and here and here. What it means when it says it's never used is you're not printing it any place, all right? Or using it as part of technically as part of a calculation. Watch as we keep going here. So we've got a few more lines. So we've got decimal, discount amount is equal to our subtotal times our discount percent. All right. And you'll notice the underline went away. Okay, so we've got that. Then we've got decimal invoice total is equal to our subtotal minus our discount amount. All right. Now, I'm going to tell you something. There's absolutely nothing wrong with what the author did here. I want to say that again. I screwed up. Let me fix something. This curly brace, to end this, that should be up here. So I screwed up. I apologize for that. Now, I want to mention something. This is how I was taught to code. So if you say, well, I don't, what's the big deal? I'm going to show you. You can put this is declaring variables right there. I declare all my variables at the top of the program. So I would write this like this. I would say decimal discount amount equals 0M, and I'd say decimal invoice total equals 0M. Then I'd come down to here and I'd remove the word decimal because they've already been set. All right, I was just always told, and to be honest with you, when I learned this stuff, it was in a different language, but when I learned it, if you didn't put all your variables at the top of the program, the instructor would take off. I'm not going to do that. You just have to declare them before you use them. All right. And I'm declaring them up higher on in my program. To me, that makes more sense to put all that stuff together. If you say, well, I don't agree. If you want to do it the way they show it in the book, I'm not going to take off for that. All right. Then we have to fill these up. So TXT discount percent dot text. That equals the discount amount that the discount PCT that we did. And we have to format that to a string. And we want it to be a percentage with 1 decimal place. Then we want to do the TXT, and the order in which you put these, you're just filling up text boxes here. You can put these in any order you want. The order on this matters. If you put the other one up above it, discount amount won't have been set yet, so it'll be 0. So you don't want to do that. All right, so the next one is discount amount. Boy, oh boy. Dot text, and that's equal to the discount amount to string, but that's formatted as currency. And then finally, maybe I didn't call mine that. Did I call mine discount AMOUNT? I did. Then finally, TXT total, which is what I called it, dot text, that's equal to our invoice total to string. And you'll notice right there, it had everything I wanted. I'll get rid of this. So equal, yeah, I want the invoice total. Yeah, I want it to string. Yeah, I want it currency. So if I just hit tab, it accepted everything. All right. Now, the only other thing I want to do from what they say in here is TXT subtotal dot focus. That's the whole program. All right. I don't have to really go over any of it. We already have. But let's save it and run it. Now, what I'm doing right now, I want you to know this. This is referred to right now as testing the program. All right, that makes sense. Now, why am I telling you that? Remember, we've got 3 or 4 different things in here. So if it's greater than or equal to 500, we should get a 20% discount. Let's check that. I'll put in 500. Calculate 20%. 500 times 20 would be $100 discount. 500 minus 100 is 400. That appears to work. And you'll notice, because that last line was to put the focus back up here, that's where my cursor's blinking. Now I'm going to clear because we've got a clear button. Now I want to check the next one. And I'm going to put in something, I'll put in 250. All right, so I should get 15%. All right, and do the math. I think that's going to be $37.50 if I calculated it right. And it is. 15%, 250 minus 37.50 is 212.50. Looks like it works. Now, remember, less than 500. So I'm going to run it and I'm going to put in 499.99 to make sure that it's 15% and not 20. And it is. All right. Then I'm going to check 100 and I should get 10%. So this should be 10%, $10, and $90. All right. And you can see everything appears to be working. And as I mentioned to you before, if I run this and either leave this blank, I'll get an exception, was not in the correct format, or if I run it, whoops, I don't know why I keep doing that, but I do. If I run it and I put something non-numeric in there, I get the same thing. All right. These are all things that in later chapters, we're going to learn how to rectify or fix, I guess, those kinds of errors. All right. And actually, I'm going to show you a little bit of some of that a little bit later today. All right. So that was everything that was in here. Some rules again. Yeah. Spaces. It's case sensitive. Changing with colons. All right. Putting in curly braces. All right. Now, I do want to mention something. The curly braces that are shown, these 6 curly braces, none of those are necessary. If you only put in one line of code after an if or an else if, you don't need to put it in curly braces. That said, what you'll find is I always do anyway. I like to delimit the stuff or bookend the stuff. So I know this belongs to this because it's inside of those curlies. That's just the way I do things. If you put more than one line in an if or in an else if or in an else, you must put it in curly braces. All right. So how to detect and correct syntax errors. Well, I typed it in pretty well, but let's put in some errors. Some of this you've seen already. All right. For instance, I leave off the M. It's 0, so it took it. But I leave off the M here. I get an error. I can go down and look in my error list down here. And it says literal of type double cannot be implicitly converted to type decimal. What the heck does that mean? It means that there is a data type that's known as a double. And that's the default data type when you don't put an M on the end. So they're two different types. They're apples and oranges. As soon as I put that in, boom, that goes away. If I leave the semicolon off, I get a different error. It says semicolon expected. All right. Those are common types of errors. Now, let's say that I misspell this. I left the T off. Now it's discount percent. And again, it's highlighted and it says the name discount percent does not exist in the current context. You're probably going to get that error multiple times during your career. And typically that just means you spelled something incorrectly. All right. So I just showed you some of those. They'll mention some more of them in here, different ways that you can get errors, etc. All right, more coding skills. Code in a readable style. What they're saying here is that's what they did, is they wrote this in a readable style. All right, but you could have literally written it like this, and it would have worked. Now, since we have all of the default settings, it would actually show it to us like this. All right, but you can turn that stuff off and write it like that. Please don't do that. All right. So use indentation and extra spaces to line things up. Use spaces to separate words. Use blank lines. Soon, we're going to talk about comments, and you should use those too. We'll get into those in just a minute. Well, I guess even sooner than I thought. A comment, this is an example right here. All right. And I'll put this one in there. All right. In just a second. I think I can copy it. Oh, that's nice. All right. There's two types of comments that you can put. Actually, there's more than two, but two that we'll talk about right now. If I want to just put in something simple here, like for example, if I want to say here, subtotal must be greater than or equal to 500, I can come over to here and put in // and it's green. And I can say subtotal must be greater than or equal to $500. That is a single line comment. Once you put in two / on a line, the rest of the line is automatically a comment. So if I put this at the beginning, I'm going to get an error because now I don't have an if statement. All right. On the other hand, and I wish I wouldn't have done that because I just going to go back to my clipboard again. If you want to put in a multi-line comment, all right, a multi-line comment, as they showed here, okay, notice it didn't bring the formatting over, and that's okay. We'll fix it. I'm not going to do it exactly like they did, so. Okay. And how you do this, I could have just put -- at the beginning of each line. All right. And that's actually pretty important. Okay. I'm going to get rid of this. So it starts with a / and an asterisk. It ends with an asterisk and a /. Now, what happens occasionally is you're running your program. And you know what? This darn clear routine just doesn't work. but every time I run my program, I'm getting errors and I can't figure out what the problem is. All right. So what you can do is you can highlight the whole routine and then go up here into where you've got your icons, and near the end, there'll be one that looks like a bunch of lines, straight or different lines. If I click on that one, it comments everything out at once. If I click on what's next to it, it uncomments it. That can be really nice because sometimes when you're working on something, you do want to comment something, comment something out because it's not working. All right. I don't know if they're going to mention that in here or not, but I wanted to show that to you. All right. So again, comments are used for what's called internal program documentation. If I go out to this site right here, so if I go out to all right, if I go out here to learn.microsoft.com, all right, this is Microsoft's section. So if I want to know something about C# comments, for example, I don't know why, but I could do this. The point is, this is external documentation. It doesn't exist in the program itself. When you put documentation or comments in the program itself, then it is internal documentation. All right. Okay. Rid of that. Now they talk about the text editor toolbar. They're probably even going to mention the thing. I guess I could have shown it here. That's how you can comment and uncomment. All right. It says to move quickly between lines of code. You can bookmark things. I don't ever use that. Look at that if you want to. Collapsing and expanding. This is kind of neat. And what that means is right here, when you look, there's a minus sign here. If I click it, it collapses everything. It's still there, but it collapsed it all down into one line. If I click it again, it comes back. Sometimes that can make it real nice because let's say that I wanted to read something and it was being, I had something else that was real big before it, or it was between two things of code. You can click that whenever you want to, or never do it. All right. The next thing that's in there is code snippets. And I'm not going to lie to you, I don't ever use these. But there are shortcuts that will provide code for you. All right. So, for instance, if you type in an I, there it says, oh, you want to do an if. So it'll start typing this in for you. All right. If you want to use that, go for it. And as it says, to use that, says to surround existing code with a code snippet, you do this, and you can use tools code snippet manager to bring up a dialog to play with it. I don't use it. There's nothing wrong with it. I just don't use it. Now, refactoring, this is kind of neat. All right. What it is sometimes you end up writing a routine and the routine is so long that it should be broken up into a bunch of smaller routines. All right. That's called refactoring. And you can refactor manually, meaning you're doing it yourself. All right. Now, why am I getting that? I don't know. Good golly. All right. So when you refactor, you can manually refactor, or you can have the system try to figure out things for you as far as refactoring. So what they're doing here, I think they're doing it here. Well, this is a rename type of thing, but it says if you want to refactor, you take the code that you'd want to go and put into its own routine, highlight the name, right click on it, and select rename. Now, I don't use this very often, if ever. Why? Because I don't like to give control to the machine when I don't have to. I'd rather do this myself. Then I got it. I can move whatever code I want to move over. I can do it whatever way I want to do it. All right. But it's up to you. These are all little niceties that you can choose to use or not use. All right. Now, we're near the end of the chapter here. We'll take another break in a few minutes. But it says you learned in chapter 1 that you run a program by clicking the start button. Okay. Notice what it says. This builds the project if it hasn't been built yet. There are things that you can do. If I'm writing a program, let's say that I'm writing this and it's not done yet. First of all, again, these lines are gray, so I could remove them. Notice if I click on one of them, all right, usually if I go off to the side, it's not showing it here. All right, but I can highlight them because I'm not using them and remove it if I want to. You don't have to do that. You can leave them in there. It doesn't hurt anything. All right, but sometimes I've got a program and it's not showing me any errors, but I don't really want to run it yet. It's not ready to run. So if I want to, I can go in here and I can choose build and tell it to build my solution. And then what should come up in here, I don't know why it's not, but it's being hidden or something now. It'll give you information here. It'll tell you whether or not it worked. All right. Is that something you're going to use a lot? Not in this class, probably, but you might very well use that quite a bit in the AWD1100 class. All right. A little more on that then, and I think that's just about it. All right. So when you test it, you're running it. The goal of you running a program, this may sound counterintuitive, but the goal of you running a program is you try to break it. Why? Well, especially if you're creating it for someone, it's much better to have you break it than have you give it to them and have them break it. All right. I'll always remember this. Years ago, I had a student in a class. His name was Jeff. All right. No relation, no nothing. Nice guy. But you might laugh at this. It wasn't meant to be funny. I came out and said something, and he thought I was being a smart aleck, but I wasn't. But he got his assignment back, and his program didn't work. All right. I was able to break it fairly easily, and I took off on his assignment. And he said, it only breaks sometimes. You really should have given me a 90% because it only breaks 10% of the time. And I said, well, would you go out and buy software that they were advertised as it works 90% of the time? And he goes, no. And I said, you just asked me to, because that's what he was doing. So the idea is when you run a program, you're trying to find errors, bugs in the program. If you've never heard the story, supposedly it's true. Many years ago, probably back in the late 50s or early 1960s, there was a woman about 4.5 feet tall, a rear admiral in the U.S. Navy named Grace Hopper. And she was, at the time, the only programming language that existed was machine language, zeros and ones. She was running her program and it was giving bad or incorrect results. She looked at her code and said, there's no reason that this should be giving me incorrect results. So she went to the computer, she took the back off of the computer, and sure enough, there was a moth in there, a dead moth, that somehow was screwing things up. That, and I'm not joking, no, it's not a funny, was the first computer bug. And since then, the act of finding errors in code has been known as debugging. All right? And that's what they're telling you should do in here. Test with valid data to make sure it reacts the way you want. Test with invalid data. Why? To make sure that you're covering that. All right? And again, some of that runtime errors and exceptions that you've already seen, we're going to handle that later. So that's what they mentioned here. You've already seen this. And again, we're going to have a whole chapter on that later. It says, I guess it's up in chapter 11. We'll talk all about debugging. All right. So I've got 10:14. Let's make it 10 minutes. And when we come back, I'm going to build for you 3 iterations of a calculator program. Feel free to join in or not, just watch. Eventually, as soon as I can get this thing in GitHub fixed. I'm going to have all this code that I'm creating will be put out there for you on GitHub, and you'll be able to grab it if you want to. All right. I will see you then at 10:25. During the break.
This guy who died in Illinois.
Yeah.
Since, I mean,
I never got back to you now.
so I guess do is come in and sign it. I mean, it's free money, yeah, so. I talked to financial aid this morning thinking that maybe he had taken care of it down there, but he hasn't, so.
Okay, I'll tell you what I'm gonna do.
Yeah.
He's in class with Evan,
Yeah,
and I'm gonna tell, unless you wanna do it. Sometimes Evan is there, so sometimes people come in. I don't know if he may be even coming in. I don't know.
okay, so you just have to go to financial aid, yeah, so he is.
Why you wouldn't wanna do that?
I mean, see me or financial aid, either way, I'm just trying to.
Yeah, I'll send one right now.
Okay, thanks.
Sure. All right, it's 10:25, so I'm going to continue on. I just wanted to show you this. The next part of the book is going to be section 2. No, we're not starting on it. We won't until sometime at least late next week. But they're saying in chapter 4, we learn arithmetic operations. Most of these are what you'd expect, but there's a few operators you probably have not seen before. In chapter 5, we'll learn more, not just about the if statement, but about an if, and if else, and if else if, and we'll talk about something called the switch statement. In chapter 6, you're going to actually be exposed to that today. I'm going to build a program, then I'm going to break it up into what's called methods. All right. In chapter 7, we do a lot more with working to make sure data is valid. In chapter 8, we work with arrays and collections. Chapter 9, dates and strings. Chapter 10 will be, it's kind of a hodgepodge or a miscellaneous chapter where they talk about some stuff they didn't get to before. Chapter 11 is a short chapter that's all about debugging that we just talked a little bit about right now. All right. Okay. So what I'm going to do quickly is I'm going to do a file save all on this, and I'm going to close this, and I'm going to come in and I'm going to create another folder in here that I'm just going to call calculator. All right, now I'm going to start up a new session of Visual Studio. All right, and I'm going to come in and I'm going to create a new project. And like I said, I'm going to do a console app, but I'm going to do the console app.net framework. All right, so console app.net framework, click on that, click next. I'm going to call this calculator console 01 because I'm going to make 2 of them. And I'm going to put it into a solution name that's just called calculator because I'm going to build, hopefully before we finish today, 2 console versions and then a GUI version of this. All right, now, so I've got calculator console 1 for the project name, or 01. I'm going to put it into that folder that I just created called calculator. All right, and the name of the solution will also be calculator. All right, and I'm going to click create. So you can see all this stuff. Again, when you create a console application like we are right now, there's no graphical user interface. It's all code. That's all it is. All right, I don't think we'll need anything in here, but maybe the using system, so I'm going to get rid of all these. All right, now this is the function that makes everything go. It's called main. It's the point of entry into your program. And guess what? It is also the point of entry into your program, even if you're writing a GUI. We'll look at that later. All right. Now, if I create variables inside of here, they're only known in this routine. So if I make other routines down here, which I'm going to do in a bit, I've got my choice. I can either take that information if I need it down in other routines and pass it, or I can take the information and declare it up here outside of any routine, which means it's global to the routine. So for right now, I'm going to create a bunch of variables and I'm going to make them global. So I'm going to say here a comment, declare and initialize global variables. And again, when I say global, I mean they're global to the program. I don't have to pass them around. If you don't know what I mean, you will in a later chapter. All right. And I'm going to make here about 10 variables. Now, I can make a double. I can make this a decimal. It doesn't matter. What's the difference between a decimal and a double? All right. Both of them are designed to hold numbers. Both of them can hold decimal points. All right. most of my work that I do with doubles are monetary calculations, not always, but most of them. So I'm just using a double here. And I'm going to have all right, so these are my variables, and let's quickly go over them. I'm going to read a value into N1 STR. It's going to say on the screen, enter number 1. Boom. When I enter it, it's going to go into N1 STR. Then I'm going to convert it to a double, and that N1 STR will then go into N1. And I'll do the same thing with N2. Sum is going to add the two numbers, subtract, or diff will subtract, prod will multiply, quote will divide, and mod will be a remainder operator. All right. So I'm going to do this in here, and I'll put comments throughout. So I'm going to say input first number. And this is, again, how you typically do it. Now, usually I'd have to come in and write either system.console.writeLine, and then I could put something in here like hello, and it would write hello on the screen. And that it's totally fine to do that. All right. But there's a little bit of a shortcut. First of all, since I'm using system up here, that's why I left it in here. I don't need the word system in front. So it's a little less typing. And see, it still works. But if I remove the using system, I'm going to get an error there. That's why I left it in. All right. But there's another one I can add here, and it's using static system.console. If I put that in like that, then I don't even need the word console. I can just use a write line. It's just a shortcut, you know, and if you say, well, I don't care, then don't use it. It's totally fine. All right. I'm going to make this a write so it stays on the same line. And I'm going to say enter first number and put a tab after that. All right. And then I'm going to say N1 STR equals read line. Oops, don't want that. Console. I don't need console. Just read line. Now, okay, I'm not expecting that probably makes a whole boatload of sense to you. Why am I getting an error here? An object, oh, I'm sorry. Let's see. These have to all be static. All right. And they have to be static because we're using them in a method main that is static. So I'll have to put static in front of each one of these. Bear with me for a second. All right. Now my error went away. For now, I'm going to put in here the word read line, another read line. If I didn't do that, it would fly right off the screen. So let me show you what I've done so far. All right, it says enter first number. If I put 12 in there and hit enter, okay, and I hit enter again, the program's done. It isn't doing anything right now, but that's okay. That really and truly is just fine. I'm going to copy this. And now I'm going to say enter second number. And second will go here. And this will be N2 STR. So now I've got two string values, because when I key in something, it goes in as a string. So now I want to convert each one of these to a double. All right. All right, there's the first one. And I'm going to do it again to the other one. Now I can run the program now, and all you're going to see is it's going to ask me to enter a number, and then it's going to ask me to enter another number, and that's going to be it. But that's fine. So file, save all, we'll run it. It says enter first number, I put in 34. Hit enter, enter second number, I put in 12. Hit enter again, the program's done. Now, that's not doing very much, and you all know that. So now I want to perform my calculations. So I'll do those right here. And they're pretty much exactly what you'd expect. So sum equals N1 plus N2. Diff equals N1 minus N2. Prod equals N1 times N2. Quote equals N1 divided by N2. And mod equals N1, and you put a percent sign in there. It'll give you the remainder. All right. So now I've gone in and I have done all of my calculations. Well, now I want to display all this. All right. So I'll put in another comment that says display results. All right. And I'm going to put in here a right line. I'm just going to print a couple of blank lines. All right. And now I'm going to print out all of this stuff that I just put in here. In other words, the sum, then the difference, then the product, then the quote, then the modulo. All right. And then we'll be done with this program. So now I'm gonna show you this. This is not a good way to do it, but we haven't talked about a better way of doing it yet. So all right, so that's going to do the sum. I'm just going to copy this down. So we've got the sum. This will be minus, and it'll be the diff. All right. This will be times, and it'll be the product. All right. This will be the divide. So it'll be the quote. And this will be the modulo, which is that. It's the remainder operator. All right, so it'll be mod. Now, if I divide, like, let's say 117 by 13, and let's say the answer is 8.63543, something like that. When I do divides, I like to say that I want them to 2 decimal places. All right, so that one I'm going to change, but everything else will stay the same. All right, now I've got a calculator. If I don't, it's not showing me any errors. So let's do a file, save all, and see if it works. All right, we'll take a fairly big number, 541, and the second number we'll use 28. And there's 541 plus 28, 541 minus 28, 541 times 28, 541 divided by 28. Notice the 2 decimal places. And here I get 9. Well, this is going to be somewhere around 20, 19 or 18, whatever. But the remainder of that is 9. So why did I take the time to show you this? All right, not because I'm trying to pad the class or anything, but I wanted to show you, first of all, how you can go in and you can write a fairly simple routine in not that much code. All right. Also, what I'm going to do in just a minute is I'm going to rewrite this. I'm going to copy everything that I've got inside of main, everything, copy it to the clipboard, and then I'm going to rewrite it. Why? Because I'm going to write one routine that does this, then one routine that does this. In fact, in my same routine, I'll do both this and this. So I'll read in the number and then parse it. Then I'll read in another number and parse it in another routine. Then I'm going to have separate calculations, separate routines for each one of those. They'll be very short, but they'll be just, separate routines. Then I'll have another routine to do this. Why? Because that's how you write code. All right. This is an unbelievably simplistic example compared to if you were working out in the field and actually doing something where you were a professional making money. All right. But it starts to show you what we will be building toward. So again, I'm going to come in here. I'm going to actually grab everything. So I got everything in here except this right here. And I'm going to make another project right now. So I'm going to do a file save. So I've got my other one. Now I'm going to close this, and I should be able to close this. And I'm going to come in and create another project. So add new project. It'll again be a console app.NET framework. This one will be called Calculator Console 02. It'll be in my calculator folder. It'll be the same framework. So create looks just like the other one did. But I'm going to come up to here, to right here, and now paste this in. Now I've got two programs that are identical. I'm getting that error because remember, I have to come up here and write using static system.console. Now all these errors are going to be gone. I hope at least. Well, like there's still one. All right, I somehow didn't copy over a curly brace. So now I've got two identical programs. This is exactly the same as the other one, but I'm going to fix this, so to speak, so that I'm going to put each thing that's in here in its own routine. Plus, I'm going to put a special thing at the beginning of this so I can run it again and again and again. All right, so I'm going to start by saying in here, while, this is something we'll go over in a later chapter, 1 equal 1, and 1 always equals 1. So I'm putting this program into what is called an infinite loop. I want it to keep running and running and running, you know, the Energizer bunny or whatever you call that. All right. And each time I put in new numbers, I want the screen to clear. So I'm going to put a clear in there. That's short for console.clear or system.console.clear. All right. Now I'm going to get a boatload of errors here. Don't let any of it bother you. All right. So I'm going to put in here input first number. All right. And there's my first error. Input second number. There's another error. Compute sum. There's another error. And I should trying to be more consistent with what they do in our book. They always take their methods and start them with a capital letter. So I've got compute sum, then I'll have compute diff, and let's just call it difference because that's what it is. Then compute product, then compute quotient, and then compute modulo, which is the remainder. Then finally, we'll just end it all up by just saying print results. All right. Now I can go back and grab this comment here, this input first number, and put it here, and put it again here, but change that to second. All right. And now I've got all these. So I got perform calculations. You know, I could put a comment there that says compute the sum. To me, that's kind of not necessary because I'm trying to come up with good names here. Now I got all these errors. So I'm going to take all these and I'm going to comment them out until I write them. So I'm commenting all that code out that's in there. All right, now I only have one error, and that's because I don't have a routine called input first number. All right, so don't let that worry you. That's fine, because this is input first number. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to end this right here. Now, it's going to give me errors. Don't worry about it. And now I don't have put in let's say this one. All right, come on. All right, so now I'm going to start writing the routines. So this is our main routine. And now I'm going to come down here and I'm going to put in input first number. And I'll bring in this. All right. And I might as well convert it over right away to a double. All right. Now I want to do the same exact thing, but instead of the first number, I want to do it with the second number. And you can see, literally, I've got everything in here already. Okay. So there's my, doesn't like something, we'll fix it. But there's my input first number. And there is my input second number. All right. So it says N2, ambiguity between program N2 and program.N2. What did I do? It's telling me that, okay, there's N2. N2.string, convert this. I think it's because I've got some stuff down here. I think it's going to work its way out, but we'll see in a minute. All right. So let's put in here static. Compute sum. And all this is going to have to say is return N1 plus N2. I'll put it up here. Okay. In fact, we're not even going to return it. Yeah, we will. So I'm going to change this to sum equals. All right. Input first number, but now I have to say that it's returning an int. Static int. All right. All those errors are gone. What doesn't it like about N2 here? I goofed up something. Two. First. Two string and their second number. Two string. I don't know what the problem is. Hopefully it's going to work its way out, but we're going to see in a minute. So hit enter here. All right. So we've got compute sum. Now we will have compute difference. And that should be a double that it's returning, not an int. Okay. Return N1 plus N2. That was sum. This should be a double also. Okay. Now we want this to say compute difference. And that's N1 minus N2. All right. Then we'll have a compute product. And that's N1 times N2. Then we'll have a compute quotient. And that'll be N1 divided by N2. And finally, we'll have a compute modulo. And that's N1 with the modulo operator, N2. So we can get rid of all those now. And I can come in here and write the last routine. So static void display results. And now I just have to put all this stuff in there. All right. Okay. Now I can uncomment all of these. Back. Yeah, I can uncomment all of them here. All right, so now I can say sum. That should just be input first number. That's part of the reason. So this should be sum. Sum equals compute sum. Difference, did I call it difference or diff? Diff equals compute difference. Prod equals compute product. Quote equals compute quotient. Mod equals compute modulo. All right. All my errors are gone almost. We'll fix them in a minute. All right. So let's see. N2 is this. Okay, that's all fine. Compute sum. Compute difference. Compute product. All right. That again should be a double. And so should that. And so should that. All right. Now it says here, that was called print results. And what did I call it down here? Display results. So let's call it display results up here. All right. I have got no more errors, and the program should function exactly as it did before. Let me run it. And if everything works, we'll go back and look at everything that's in here. Okay, there's our addition, our subtraction, our multiplication, our division to 2 decimal places, and our modulo. All right. Now, I'm looking there. That's what's funny is it should have run it again, and it didn't. So let's see. Not sure why, but let's go through the whole program. All right. This is what we read in for the first number. This is what we read in for the second number. We take the first number and we run a convert dot to double on it, and it becomes, instead of N1 STR, it becomes N1. We do the same thing to N2 STR. Then we add the two together to give us the sum, subtract the second from the first to give us the difference, multiply the first by the second for the product, divide the first by the second for the quotient, and then finally do the modulo. All right. Now, I'm not sure why that isn't working, but it didn't. While 1 equal 1, that's telling it to loop, for lack of better words. All right. So what should have happened is it should have come in here and cleared the screen, then allowed us to input the first number, and you saw that. Then allowed us to input the second number, and you saw that. Then compute the sum, then compute the difference, then compute the product, then compute the quotient, then compute the modulo, then display the results. You saw all that. It worked. All right. So we inputted our first number and converted it. We inputted our second number and converted it. We added the first to the second and returned that computed sum. We subtracted the second from the first and returned that computed difference. We multiplied the first by the second and returned that computed product. We divided the first by the second and returned that computed quotient. We said divide the first by the second and give us the remainder, and we return that computed modulo. All right. Then we displayed the results. All right, I'm going to take this read line out of here, see if that's what screwed it up, and I'm going to run it again. All right, we'll use something simple in here, 84 and 16. So there they all are. Looks like it's fine to me. I'm going to hit enter. And like I said, I'm not sure why it's not running more than one time, but it's not. I'm not going to worry about that right now. All right, we can go back, fix that later. The point is what you see in the difference between this one and the one I did previously. All right, what you're seeing as far as what the difference is all right, is this one has routines to do everything we're doing in here, everything. The other one had one routine where we did everything. So imagine you're working for a company and you are creating a project that's going to be thousands of lines long or more. Then you can take each one of these and give them to a group of coders. And eventually, yes, you will have to put them together. All right, I'm going to just try to remove the clear and see if, I don't know why that's not running more than once. I'm trying to figure that out. 1 equal 1, that's correct. That was a 1, and that was a 1. Okay. No, and like I said, I'm not sure. Let's see if we can figure out why. All right. So I'm going to come in here. This is something we're going to go over in a later chapter. But if I take my mouse and I put it right here, that creates what's called a breakpoint. The program is going to stop right there. All right. Now I'm going to put one in. I don't care about the inputting the numbers, but I'm going to put one by each return statement. So it'll stop and then start again, but that's okay. Just want you to see this. Finally, after we get done with this, put one here too. All right, now I'm going to tell it to run the program. And it asked me again to enter a first number and a second number, 12 and 8. All right, and it's done everything. Okay, that's a little weird. Didn't stop anywhere. All right. So let me hit enter. Something goofy is happening here. I don't know what. Introduce constant. I don't want to introduce a constant. Introduce parameter. I don't know what the problem is. But what is supposed to happen when you do this is it's supposed to stop right there. And I'll tell you what I'm going to do, just because of the fact that it's not working. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to write this quickly again as a GUI app, and we will put in there, we will put in the breakpoints to see what's happening. So I'm not sure what the problem is, but you've now seen how to create a console program where everything is in main, and how to create a console program. All right. And in that console program, in the second one, all right, we broke it up into different routines. All right. So I'm going to create one more. All right. And this one, it'll be fairly simplistic, just so you know. All right. But like I said, I'm going to create one more program. And the bad news is I had notes for everything, and looks like I didn't bring over my note for this one. That's fine. I'm going to then just do it by hand. So I don't have notes for this one. That's fine. So file, save all, and I'm going to close this. Oh, okay. I'm not going to ask, but the reason that it wasn't printing out any of that stuff is, guess what? It was running the first program every time. I didn't tell it to, when I went to the second program, I didn't tell it to come in here and go in and set as startup project. I'm going to run this again, and now it's going to run multiple times. I would at least put money on it that that's what's going to happen. All right, so enter first number 45, enter second number 6. Does that? There it go. Enter first number. Now it's in a loop. I was never running the first one. I was running the second one. And while we've done that and it works now, let's quickly just make a couple changes. And that is, I'm going to go back into here. All right, I'm going to put that word clear back in here. All right, and I'm going to put in breakpoints so you can see what happens. All right, now put in a breakpoint. No, not there. Here and here. And all I'm doing is clicking. This is called the gutter area, this gray area here. And here and here. Right, I think I've got one in each one. So let's run it again. And again, I'll put in 2 numbers. And now notice it stopped here. That's what a breakpoint does. The program breaks. I can take my mouse now and put it over N1, and it says it has a value of 67. I can put it over N2, and it says it has a value of 13. It did not do the calculation yet. So I can tell it to continue, and now it stops here, and the values have the same amounts. And I can tell it to continue again, and now it stops here. Now, these are such small routines. That's why there's only one line I can put a breakpoint on. All right, but I wanted to show you how you can stop a program from running and check out the results at any time. All right, now I went through the last one. All right, now it's actually coming through here. Let's get rid of the breakpoints. It was not a great example to show it to you, but at least you've seen it. To get rid of them, I think I can right mouse click, and there's something in here. What is it? It's under, is it view? One of these must be under debug. Toggle breakpoints, disable all breakpoints. So I turned them off. They're still there, but I turn off. They won't run now. So now if I come in and put in 2 numbers, all right, everything will run. Now that clear was put in the wrong spot. And that was why you're not seeing any output. Let me just get rid of the clear. So now it is actually working. All right, now it's saying to do it again, etc. I have to play around with that. But you've got 2 of them that have been built now, and I'm going to quickly build the last one. All right, so let me close this. All right, I'm going to go and create one more solution. So I'm going to add one more project. I am going to make it a Windows Form.NET framework, and this one is going to be called Calculator GUI. And I usually call my ones GUI like this because it is a graphical user interface program. All right, and click create. Now, like I said, I'm going to make this fairly simple. Why? Because, we're at 11 o'clock already. So, because I like to do this, I'm going to come in and change my background color. All right, I'm going to make 7 buttons. These are going to be for my mathematical operations. All right. So this will be my add, subtract, multiply, divide, modulo. This will be a clear, and this will be an exit. All right. Then I'm going to put in 3 labels. Let's just put in 1 to start with. Okay. And we will again change the background color. And I will again reset the auto size from true to false. All right. So that'll be my enter first number. This will be our enter second number. And this will say something like the answer is. All right, we're going to have 2 text boxes. And I'm actually going to make the answer itself. I could make it a read-only text box, but I'm going to make it another label. All right, so this is the user interface. It's not pretty at all, but from the amount of time I spent on it, I guess it's just fine. Now I'm going to highlight everything, and I'm going to go over to my font and set the font for everything to 20 point, bold, and Arial again. All right, so that stuff is all set. Okay, I'm going to quickly come through here, and let's do this. I'm going to take this, and I'm going to center it all. I'm going to take these two and center them. Oops, not right, center. All right, that's pretty much everything the way I want it to be. So I'm going to do a Control A to highlight, right mouse click, and I'm going to choose lock controls. All right, this might be a little small. We'll see in a minute. So this one will be LBL number 1. And it will say number 1. This will be LBL number 2, and it will say number 2. This will say result. We could say answer, whatever you want. All right. This is going to be empty. All right. I'm just changing what's in here right now. So again, this was LBL number 1, LBL, I didn't change that one. LBL number 2. This will be LBL result. And this will be, well, let's call that one LBL result STR, a result title. And this one will be called LBL result. All right, let's make this TXT number 1. And this will be TXT number 2. All right, I think all these are done. This one will be BTN sum. And it'll say sum. And we can even do ampersand SUM for sum. The second one will be difference. So ampersand DIFFERENCE. And we'll call this BTN difference. This one will be product. So we'll make that ampersand product. The next one will be quotient. So it will be ampersand quotient. Oops, I didn't move. Okay, let's make that product again. That one will be quotient. And it will be BTN quotient. This one will be modulus or modulo or whatever you want to call it. We'll call it remainder because that's what it is. And we'll put an ampersand before the R in remainder. So S, D, P, Q, R, that all worked. This will be clear. We can use the ampersand before the C because we have no calculate button. So that's clear. And it'll be BTN clear. All right. This will be exit, so it'll be BTN exit. And I'll make this exit as well. All right, now let's check and make sure I've renamed everything. I did not rename the form when you look here. So let's do that. So I'm going to right mouse click on the form and choose rename and rename it FRM calculator. Hit enter. Yes, I want to change everything. All right, now this is the error some of you have gotten before. I wish I didn't get it, but I did. Some of you have already seen this. So it doesn't like the fact, all right, it doesn't like the fact that I've renamed this. Watch what happens when I rename it back again. All right, so I'm going to go back and rechange it to form1.cs. All right, yes, I want to change back. Now when I go back to this and I look at it in design mode, it's back. All right, and it all has to do with when you change this stuff. It's some goofy thing. A student looked up once and told me, but I honestly don't remember what it is, but I'll change it in just a bit and it will work. All right, or it should at least. Now, what else do I want to do here? I want to set my tab order to 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So I'll do that first. So I'm going to view my tab order. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and do another view tab order. All right, I'm going to click on here. I'm going to go down to my start position and I'm going to set it to center screen. Now I don't have in here, and I guess I didn't change the name of this. I don't have in here a calculate button. Okay, so could I put in an accept button? Sure, but I don't really want to. But I will put in this. All right, and that'll be my my cancel button when I hit escape. Okay. So I believe now if I were to run this, let's go back into code mode here, that it should, oops, and I did the same thing. I have to tell it that this is my active project by right mouse clicking on the project name and choosing set as startup project. Okay, and now we should be able to run it. And there it is. Now it doesn't do anything yet. You know that. All right, but we're going to try to write it in the same way we wrote the other one. That's what I'm telling you. All right, so as I come in here, there's my sum. Don't need this. There's my difference. There's my product. There's my quotient. There's my remainder. There's my clear. There's my exit. Now, I'm going to write these not exactly the same, but very similarly to what you just saw in the other one. I'm going to come up to the top here, and I'm going to create some global variables. 3. I'm going to say here double number 1. I don't have to give it an initial value, but I will say equals 0. You could say 0 or 0.0. It doesn't matter. Number 2 equals 0. And now I'm just going to have a double result also equals 0. Just those 3 variables. All right. Why? So I can come in here and do this. I can come in here and say number 1 equals convert dot to double txt number 1 dot text. Oops, I don't know what it gave me that for, but it did. Now I can say number 2 equals the same thing, convert. All right. And now I can say result equals number 1 plus number 2. All right. And now I could just come in here and say this, TX, or I could put the answer in there, but I'm going to write another routine. All right. You'll see why in a minute. I'm going to call show answer. It's going to give me an error because I haven't written it yet. So I'm going to come down here and write that. And it's actually going to need one piece of information. It's going to be a string, which is going to be my operand. All right. All right. And now I'm going to say in here, LBL answer, or I guess we said result dot text equals, all right. And I'm going to put in here, N1 dot, or number 1 dot toString plus operand, all right, plus, I'm going to put it on multiple lines so you can see everything I'm doing, number 2 dot toString plus an equal sign plus our result. right? If I did this right, if it's right, all right, then if I put in up here, all right, and I got to pass in a plus sign. Okay. So if I did this right and I put in 34 and 17 and I click sum, it should come back and say 34 plus 17 equals 51. Let's see if it does that. All right. I guess I didn't space it very well, but it looks like it's working. All right. So that's good. That's a good start. And I can fix that too right here. Plus a blank space plus my operand, and then plus another blank space plus then my second number. And here I'll put in one more blank space with one more plus sign. So let's see it now. All right. Now, like I said, I might have to widen this out because if I put in a really big number, it's not, the whole thing isn't going to show. All right. So let's do that first. I am going to unlock that control and make it bigger. And that should be plenty big. And then lock it back up again. All right. Now I can do the same thing for difference. Okay. Now, if I do this, I want to show you this. All right. Let's see. And I got to do a minus sign here and a minus sign here. Now difference should work. So again, if I do a plus, let's do them both. So there's plus and there's minus. They're both working. Now, hopefully you notice this. I'm doing the same thing here and here. So I can write myself another routine and just grab these two lines and I'll call this anything I want. I'll call it set N1 and N2. Kind of a dumb name, but it is saying exactly what it's doing. All right. So now I can change this. So I have to call in here set N1 and N2 with a semicolon. And I can do the same thing here. All right. And now I can come in here and copy this. I don't want that. There we go. Copy this and put it here. And I've got to change this because it's a times. And I can do it, and I have to say times in there too. I can do it again here and say divide and pass in divide. I can do it again here and say modulo. And that didn't really take very long. All right. But I should be able to come here. It should be a fully functional calculator now. Let's fill in these last couple here. All right. Now, I'm doing something here, and you may not understand why I'm doing it, but I want to show you something. All right. I'm going to write another routine here that's just called clear the form, which hasn't been written yet. So I'll run it right underneath. All right. And what do I want to clear? Well, let's look. I want to clear this. I want to clear this. I want to clear this. And I want the cursor to go back there. All right. So I want txt number 1 dot text equal to nothing. Txt number 2 dot text equal to nothing. And LBL result dot text equal to nothing. And txt number 1 dot focus. All right, so let's see if that works. Okay, so that's done. For my exit, I'm again going to copy that code that I told you I'm going to give you all a copy of. So if I forget, please remind me. It's right here. All right. And I'm going to again call another routine. I'm going to call this exit program or not, because it's going to be up to you whether you exit the program or not. So private void exit program or not. And let me paste all that code in. So that should now be working. So let's just try it here. 23 and 8. 23 plus 8, 23 minus 8, 23 times 8, 23 divided by 8. I didn't format that. That's why it's more than 2 decimal places. The remainder, clear and exit, no, exit, yes. So everything works. Now, a natural question then would be, okay, why did you call another routine here? And why did you call another routine here? So I'm going to show you. This is something that's later on in the book, but I just want to show it to you. All right. And that is, I'm going to come and I'm going to go down into here and I'm going to add something that's going to be called a menu strip. And I'm going to drag it way up here and let go. Now up here, I'm going to put down operation. You'll know why in a minute. This will say clear right next to it. And right next to that, it will say exit. Now, for the operation, all right, why isn't it letting me go down? I don't know why. It should be letting me go down in here, and I was going to put, all right, we'll do it a different way then. All right, I'll change this. This is very stupid what I'm doing right now, but so this will be sum, difference, product, quotient, remainder, clear, and exit. All right. So we now have a menu with the same options. Now, unfortunately, it gives them names, gives them real crummy names. But I'm only going to change here clear and exit. So I'm going to click on clear. And it's now called clear tool strip menu item, which is, I think, is a dumb name. So I'm going to change the name of it. All right. I'm just going to call this MNU clear. All right. And for exit, I'm going to change this and I'm going to call it MNU exit. All right. So now I've got those. Who cares? Well, I'm going to show you why you could care. So I'm going to go to clear. All right. And guess what I'm going to call? Clear the form. All right. And I can even, it doesn't hurt. I can do a control, copy this here, and I can move it up and put it right underneath the actual button. If you want to, you don't have to. All right. But there, now I've got both of them. Let's go back and let's do exit. And again, this is exit program or not. It's like that. And again, I will move that so that it is under my other exit right here. Okay. So now when I run the program, we do a file save all and let's run it. Now, if I put in, 2 numbers, now I can click clear. All right. Or I can click exit. Well, let me just, I could make these operational up here as well. I can do that in a bit. So I can add them. Now notice if I click clear, it clears everything. And if I go to exit, it provides me with the ability to exit. The reason I showed you that is the reason you oftentimes write a routine that calls another routine is so that you can call it from multiple places. And that's exactly what I just showed you. All right, so even with this one, I can come in here and change this to MNU Some, I'm not going to put the code in right now for it. This one can be MNU difference. MNU product. Sorry if you can hear that. My phone is actually ringing even though it's muted. MNU quotient. All right. And MNU remainder. Now, the reason I'm taking a second to show you this, all right, which I made a mistake there. There we go. MNU remainder. All right. It actually is, let me say this again. It actually is legal for me to be in here and, well, I gotta fix that. And I can call the click event of my button. That's considered poor programming practice, but you can do it. Let me move this. I'm going to move it under where I did my add routine before. All right, so right there. All right, so there it is. But now I'm going to take what I put in here and I'm going to pull this out. And I'm just going to call procedure add. Oh, just add. All right, I get the error because it isn't written, but I come down here and I say private void add. I paste that back in here. And now I can also call add from here. All right, let me go back and where I made it BTN sum with a big U. Let me change that. And now if I run this and I put in two numbers, I can run that from here as well. All right, so that's what I was trying to get across to you in here. Okay, now I'm supposed to be talking to Mr. Gegelman this afternoon, and Doug is my counterpart at the St. Louis campus. I'm asking him, we actually have two things that we can give for homework. What I mean is this. Either we can give these, okay, those problems that are right there, and we do some of them together and I'd assign some of them. Or a couple of years ago, one of the instructors wrote different exercises for each chapter. We're supposed to be doing the same thing. So whatever he's doing, I'm going to do. Why am I telling you that? And what does it mean? Okay. Well, if he says I'm going to be doing these, fine. Then we'll be doing those. All right. If he says, no, I'm going to use the exercises that Paul wrote a couple years ago, then we'll do those exercises, but I'll do some of these together with you as a class. So we will do some programs tomorrow together. All right. Then when I'm done with that, I have to go, what I like to do is to create what I call a pretest, which means it'll be based off of what you'll have on the test, but with different types of problems. And I will give you that pretest then tomorrow at the end of the period. All right. Tomorrow's Friday. Then we don't meet Monday, remember? So Tuesday, when we meet again, I'll give you 2 hours from about 8 to 10 to work on those problems. There'll be 3, 4, 5, whatever. Then I will do the problems, all right, right in front of you. Okay, and you can watch, you can compare what I do or whatever. Then Wednesday, you will take your first test. All right, so I will let you know tomorrow what your homework is going to be. All right, and we will work on some stuff together tomorrow as a class as well. All right, it is early again. It's 11:30. If you want to practice on this stuff, go ahead and do that. Whatever, if you've had enough, I understand. I do want to mention one more time, get rid of this, get rid of this. Yeah, back to there. Yes. Get rid of that. Please, if you haven't done so, please either do this or do this. And if you do want a book, all right, I've had one person who already wrote theirs today, and I think they said they lived in whatever. They live in a city that is near St. Louis, so they asked that it go to St. Louis. That's fine. All right. So if you do want a copy, then say either St. Louis, if you want it to be sent there, or Wentzville, if you want it to be sent here. Please do this. All right. And if you're one of the people who already sent it back in and said you want a hard copy, just send me another email with just on it St. Louis or Wentzville. All right. If I said anything you didn't understand, please let me know. All right. It is 11:30, I believe. Yep, 11:30. I'm going to be here for the next half hour. And what I'm going to attempt to do during that time, I'm sorry I sent the stuff out yesterday for those of you watching on tape, but I'm going to try to produce this right now and get it out on YouTube before I go home tonight. All right. So I will see you tomorrow at 8:05. Have a good rest of the day. Thanks.